MTA head Janno Lieber has to convince skeptical residents of the tri-state area that congestion pricing is good for them. He joins me to talk about another top issue in the governor's race. So let's get right to it. Lee Zeldin, the Republican candidate for governor, says that if he gets elected, he is going to stop congestion pricing. Can he, and is that a good idea?
Listen, I understand it's a political season, but what we're doing right now is just to implement what the state legislature passed back in 2019, which said that congestion pricing had to be implemented, and that we should follow this federal environmental review process, which is going to take a little while. We're still evaluating all the comments that came in. That's the point, is to hear from the public, give people a chance to share their views, and also to identify this issue of who should, what categories of folks should need exemptions and discounts. So we're evaluating all that. It's going to take a little while, probably early 2024, before anything really happens.
Isn't that later than you had originally suggested? Didn't you originally suggest it was 2023? I think,
again, it could be late 2023, early 2024, but I just want to be straight up that we are now in the middle of this federal environmental review process, that feds have to sign off on all of the hoops that process requires us to jump through in terms of analyzing. Remember, all the things that people have been hearing about are just us trying to analyze what would happen in different scenarios. We're not proposing it. So what we're going to do is take all that data, analyze it with the help of some experts, and then only then can we start to implement it, and after there's a federal approval. So it's going to take a little while.
The reason you bring up in the environment, one of the things that people are concerned about is the increased pollution in some areas like the South Bronx, where they're supposed to get more truck traffic. Also in the areas like the tunnels that come into the Central Business District, both on the Hudson River and on the East River, that there might be more pollution in those areas. And some of those areas are communities that have big asthma problems. Are you going to be able to deal with that and rectify that before congestion pricing goes into effect?
It's a very good question, because the whole point of this process is to identify where that might happen so that you can make sure it doesn't happen. So, for example, in the South Bronx, an area that has had its fair share of environmental impacts from prior projects, now knowing what might happen, we can actually make some adjustments.
How do you ameliorate that?
Well, we at MTA actually came up with a new scenario that was studied that brought the number of additional trucks on the Cross Bronx almost down to zero. So that shows where we're coming from.
How do you do that?
Well, what you do is you...
This is news.
No, it's actually in the environmental assessment. It was just one of 7 or 8 different scenarios.
But how do you reroute all these trucks?
What you do is actually, what that scenario did is it reduced the toll for trucks enough so that they wouldn't be as incentivized to take a new route and to go over the Cross Bronx. It is fair that the folks in the Bronx make sure that they don't have additional environmental impacts. But broadly speaking, Marcia, it's really important. This is good for the whole region, including for New Jersey and Long Island in terms of air quality. And for people who do have to drive, or businesses that do have to bring trucks to the Central Business District, less traffic, less gridlock is going to be a good thing. So there are some benefits.
So you bring up New Jersey, so I have to ask you about it, because as you know, the governor of New Jersey is not thrilled about congestion pricing, to say the least. I was wondering if you were to say to the governor of New Jersey, listen, we're going to take some of our money that we're going to raise from congestion pricing and give it to NJ Transit, so we'll improve transit in New Jersey as well. Do you think that might eliminate some of his opposition?
I don't know. New Jersey folks will benefit, because most folks who commute from New Jersey, and 80% of them do use mass transit, but folks who come in from New Jersey, most of them come out of a Penn Station or one other terminal, and then they get on the subway or they take a bus. So the investments that we're going to make in MTA, in the capital program, with the revenues from congestion pricing will benefit them as well. I think it's a good point that we should make more strongly to our New Jersey friends.
But you don't think that you could take New York money and give it to them to help improve their transit system so they buy into it?
It's an interesting idea. I haven't really thought about it. Right now, the legislation that was passed back in 2019 says that all the revenues from congestion pricing have to fill a big hole in the capital program, and that is going to pay for us to do all the improvements we're starting to see and we need more of in the MTA system.
So another New Jersey question. What if you were to say to people who have to come into the city from New Jersey that when they take the 2 tunnels that go into the central business district, that they don't pay an additional fee, they just pay the fee to take the tunnel?
Well, a couple of the scenarios that were looked at, again, were in the study, in the environmental assessment, do actually call for there to be a credit of some kind for folks taking the tunnels that do land in the central business district.
Is that a good idea?
So that's under, it's like I said, we're not yet ready to say what we think. And in fact, we have a whole process where we have to give all the data to some outside experts and they make some recommendations to us. The goal is to have minimal impact, negative impacts on the environment, to have maximum air quality improvements. Just remember, Marcia, this week was UN week, which we all know is gridlock week, and yet traffic was even up relative to pre-pandemic. People are coming in even though they can see all those signs on the expressways that say it's a gridlock alert day. The traffic was terrible. I just came to visit you from the south end of the central business district all the way downtown to the upper end of the central business district. It took 16 minutes. If you've driven, good luck. So this is a good thing for all kinds of New Yorkers, especially people who come into town and they want to be able to get around and do business.
So let's talk about the idea of the exemptions. Everybody in the history of life who's involved in congestion pricing says, I shouldn't have to pay. So the argument that transit advocates make is that every time you give an exemption, the fee goes up.
Yeah.
What's your thought about that? And do you think that people who have, you know, city jobs, who have to come into the city and work in the central business district, police, fire, teachers, should they get an exemption? Should the city council get an exemption? Is the mayor going to have to pay a congestion fee when he goes from Gracie Mansion to City Hall? I mean,
all fair questions, but they all have to be worked out. The first step is to get all the data, to analyze it, to look at all the comments, and then give it to this body of experts who are going to study it. My own view, I think, is similar to yours, which is we should do everything possible to try to keep the base toll down. And if that means trying to limit the number of exemptions and discounts, it's hard if you start giving out a lot of those discounts and exemptions to know where to stop. I hope we keep the base toll down. I think that's what everybody wants.
So we have some news out of London this week that Andy Byford, who made history in New York a while back as being the popular train daddy, has resigned from his post in London and is coming back to the United States. My question to you is there any role for him at the MTA?
I think what he said was that, what I read was that Andy said he's going into the private sector, that he's ending his public service career. So I wish him luck. I had the good fortune of being able to work in the private sector for a few years, and it helped me put 3 kids through college. So I'm very sympathetic when someone says, you know, it might be time for change of career. Andy's a very capable guy, and I know he'll succeed at whatever he does.
So there's a number of other things, other issues that you're dealing with at the MTA. One is the fact that you're now going to install 2 cameras in every subway car to make people feel safe. How important is that to sending a message to people that they should come back on the subways?
You know, it's super important, and I think back to when I first met Governor Hochul, you know, a little more than a year ago, and we were dealing with Hurricane Ida, and she was just coming on the job, and she said, we need the subways to be in top condition to get people back to work and to revive the economy, and we need them to be safe. It was one of the first things that she emphasized. So this was something we were testing out, and the governor said, I'm going to find money. She did, to make sure that you can do it in the whole subway fleet. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to put 2 cameras in every subway car, and we will, you know, we will really, I think, have a much better handle on things if people do bad stuff. Now, important to emphasize, there are only 5 major crimes a day in the New York subway system now, between 5 and 6. So the system, I think, is a little safer than some of the general discussion leads people to believe. We're headed in the right direction.
So, but my question is that a lot of the civil rights groups, the NYCLU and others, are concerned about, you know, Big Brother is watching you. You know, we have too many surveillance cameras already. What do you say to them that why these are needed?
Listen, you know, I think that ship has sailed. We have, you know, the commuter railroads, the airports, the buses, everything has cameras on the inside. This building that we're in has cameras on the outside.
Everywhere.
You know, you're not entitled, and I don't think anybody has any expectation that it's going to be private in a public space, especially where the first priority is to protect riders and you know, to deliver a safe environment.
So one quick question before we have to go. 6-minute subway service, 6-minute bus service. Is that anywhere in the realm of reality?
You know, most of our morning and afternoon peak service is at that rate. I would love to give more service. The real issue is economics. Can we afford it? Right now, the MTA, because of the reduced ridership from COVID, has a structural deficit. After the money from Washington that Chuck Schumer helped us get runs out in a couple of years, we have a deficit because of shortage of revenue. I would love to add more service, but first we got to solve the budget problem.
Well, Janno, we'll leave it right there for now, but my conversation with the head of the MTA doesn't end here. We'll have your questions for the MTA immediately following this show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. We'll be back in just a minute.